Diaspora tragedy, the Sierra Leonean love story that ended in blood. What Africa must learn. An in-depth BAV investigation into the heartbreak, identity crisis, and hidden struggles of Africans abroad. Hello, Africa, and to our brothers and sisters across the diaspora. Tonight, on The Bold African Voice, BAV, we confront a story that has shaken hearts from Freetown to Washington. A 42-year-old Sierra Leonean man living in Maryland stands accused of brutally taking the life of a young woman he once loved in Virginia. But beyond the crime scene lies a far greater question: what's happening to the African soul in the diaspora? Are we prepared to face the pressures of migration, the silence of pain, and the hidden crisis of love turned violent? Join me, Isatu Kamara-Kargbo, as we unpack the facts, the cultural truths, and the lessons Africa must learn, right here on The Bold African Voice, BAV.
Good evening. My name is Captain Jesse Katzman. I'm the Commander of Public Affairs for the Fairfax County Police Department. We are currently in the 3900 block of Terrace Drive in Annandale for a fatal stabbing in which one adult female has been declared deceased on the scene. Just after 9:30 tonight, our officers responded to what a witness had reported was an unconscious and unresponsive female lying in the roadway. When they arrived on scene, they located the adult female with upper body trauma, and she was declared deceased. Detectives from our Major Crimes Bureau and Crime Scene Section are out here working diligently to discover the facts and circumstances surrounding this incident. Officers and detectives will be out here throughout the night canvassing the area, speaking with witnesses, and checking for cameras. We are asking for the community's help. If you or anybody you know has information regarding this incident, please call our crime solvers at 1-866-411-TIPS or our Major Crimes Bureau at 703-246-7800, option number 2. All of our updates to this case will be posted on social media. Thank you.
The incident. A 42-year-old Sierra Leonean man, identified as Musa Kargbo, residing in Maryland, USA, has been charged with second-degree murder after the fatal stabbing of a 26-year-old woman, Isha Koroma, who lived in Alexandria, Virginia. WJLA. According to the Fairfax County Police Department, FCPD, on the night of November 7th, just before 10 p.m., in the 3900 block of Terrace Drive in Annandale, Virginia, officers responded to reports of an unconscious person with trauma to the upper body. They found Koroma's body in the middle of the road. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Sierra loaded. Investigators say Kargbo traveled to Annandale from Maryland, and because the victim and suspect reportedly knew each other, they believe the incident was not random. WJLA. Kargbo was later apprehended by the Prince George's County Police Department in Lanham, Maryland, and will be extradited to Fairfax County for booking on the murder charge. The investigation is still ongoing as detectives seek to establish motive, context, and all contributing factors. Sierra loaded. Critical analysis. On the surface, this is a brutal act of violence, but deeper, it raises questions of diaspora identity, social supports, cultural stressors, gender-based violence, and accountability, both personal and communal. 1. Diaspora pressures and identity conflict. For many African migrants in the U.S., including those from Sierra Leone, the experience can be fraught with multiple pressures: expectations to succeed, financial remittances back home, cultural adjustment, and sometimes isolation. These stresses may contribute in some cases to domestic tensions. While there is no indication that those pressures alone caused this crime, it is worth asking whether and how they might intersect with incidents of interpersonal violence in diaspora contexts. 2. Gender-based violence and relationship dynamics. The fact that the victim and the accused reportedly knew each other implies a relational context, likely a romantic or intimate relationship. Globally, intimate partner violence is a serious challenge, and in diaspora communities, the added layer of migration, cultural adaptation, and often underreported dynamics can exacerbate vulnerability. This incident reminds us that diaspora communities are not immune to these societal ills. The killing of a young woman by a man she knew is a pattern that sadly echoes many other contexts. 3. Legal jurisdiction and enforcement complications. Because the accused traveled across state lines, Maryland to Virginia, and the crime occurred in Virginia, extradition, legal representation, and cultural linguistic issues may all influence the progress of the case. For Sierra Leonean diaspora members, navigating U.S. legal systems, potential visa or immigration implications, and community stigma can be overwhelming. 4. Community impact and stigma. This kind of case reverberates across the Sierra Leonean diaspora and the broader African diaspora network. On one hand, it may reinforce negative stereotypes or fuel moral panic. On the other, it should trigger communal reflection. What support systems exist for diaspora relationships? What mental health and violence prevention resources are accessible? How do cultural expectations around masculinity and relationships influence outcomes? Africa-wide comparison. Let's widen the lens beyond Sierra Leone and the U.S. diaspora and consider how analogous issues play out across the African continent and its diaspora. Relationship violence in Africa and the diaspora. Across Africa, intimate partner violence, IPV, remains a major challenge. For instance, the World Health Organization reports high rates of violence against women in many African countries. Diaspora communities often carry cultural legacies of gender roles while simultaneously being exposed to new cultural norms and legal frameworks. The collision of these spheres can produce stress. The case of Musa Kargbo and Isha Koroma highlights how these dynamics do not stay at home. They travel with people. Migration, remittances, and social pressure. In many African societies, migrants are expected to send remittances, support extended family, and also make it abroad. The psychological burden of these expectations is often underappreciated. In diaspora communities in Europe or North America, these can translate into invisible pressures on finances, on relationships, on identity. Comparatively, in African cities such as Lagos, Nairobi, or Kampala, young couples may also face stresses around economic hardship, urban migration, and shifting gender norms. The convergence of financial stress, changing social roles, and intimate relationships can increase conflict risk. Legal and institutional responses, contrast and lessons. In some African countries, legal frameworks for domestic and intimate partner violence are weak or poorly enforced. In a U.S. context, legal mechanisms exist, but access, awareness, cultural barriers, and community trust may limit their effectiveness in practice. For our Sierra Leonean diaspora in the U.S., questions arise. Do they know their rights? Do they feel safe accessing support? Are community networks alert to signs of relationship breakdown or violence? The contrast is instructive. Wealthier legal systems do not guarantee protection unless the social and cultural bridges are built. Community trust and diaspora engagement. In many African diaspora communities, issues like mental health, relationship counseling, and gender violence prevention may carry stigma. African societies often emphasize family privacy, dignity, and avoidance of external intervention. In diaspora, this can result in victims staying silent or relationships festering. Communities which have strong faith-based or cultural organizations can help, but only if they accept the need to address relationship violence openly. Comparatively, on the continent, civil society organizations are increasingly working in this space, but resources remain limited. Forward-looking approach. Given the tragic death of Isha Koroma and the charges against Musa Kargbo, what forward steps must communities, policymakers, and media pursue, both in diaspora contexts and back in Africa? 1. Strengthening diaspora support networks. We must push for African diaspora associations, including Sierra Leonean organizations, in the U.S. to incorporate relationship stress counseling, violence prevention workshops, and legal rights education. This case should catalyze efforts to ensure that migrants know how to access help when relationships turn volatile. Community centers, faith groups, and cultural associations should proactively host safe spaces dialogues about intimate partner violence and migration stress. 2. Data collection and research. This incident highlights a major gap. We have little systematic data on intimate partner violence in African migrant communities in North America. Research must be commissioned, for example, by African diaspora organizations, universities, or governments, to map incidents, risk factors, and effective interventions. Only with data can we craft policy and community responses tailored to the diaspora reality. 3. Legal cultural awareness and resources. Diaspora members must be made aware of the legal frameworks of their host countries, including rights victims have, protections available, and how to report threats or violence safely. Simultaneously, legal services should be culturally sensitive. Understanding language, migration status concerns, stigma, and trust barriers. For Sierra Leoneans in the U.S., outreach campaigns in Creole and other relevant languages may help bridge the gap. 4. Empowering women and vulnerable partners. Communities must amplify the voices of vulnerable partners, especially women. In many African cultural settings, marital or quasi-marital relationships may carry patriarchal legacies. In a diaspora context, these can become dangerous. Programming focused on women's empowerment, legal literacy, and safe exit strategies for at-risk individuals is critical. 5. Media responsibility and narrative framing. As media practitioners and community members, we must avoid sensationalism. It's tempting to see this case as an African man kills girlfriend in America and leave it at that. Instead, we must explore root causes, structural factors, migration stress, mental health, relationship dynamics, and community failure in prevention. The media's role should be to educate, inform, and push for systemic change, not only to report. Latest news and immediate implications. What do we know now, and what should we watch for next? The Fairfax County Police Department has formally charged Musa Kargbo with second-degree murder. WJLA. The investigation is ongoing. Authorities are gathering evidence, including motive, the relationship history between Kargbo and Koroma, and the circumstances that led to Kargbo traveling to Virginia and committing the crime. Wu say 9. From the Sierra Leonean media side, the story has already been picked up by outlets such as Sierra Loaded, demonstrating that the diaspora incident has resonance back home and in diaspora networks. Community alert. The Sierra Leonean diaspora in the U.S. will likely experience an uptick in scrutiny, discussion, and possibly stigma. The case may prompt community organizations to convene meetings, briefings, or counseling sessions. Legal schedules. We should monitor the extradition of Kargbo from Maryland to Virginia, the pretrial hearings, sentencing possibilities, and any community or media commentary from Sierra Leonean organizations. Reflections for Sierra Leone and the African diaspora. As a Sierra Leonean reporter speaking to our community, I feel this story cuts deeply into our shared identity and responsibilities. A tragic death in the diaspora is not purely a U.S. legal story. It is a story of migration, culture, expectation, gender, power, violence, and community silence. Here are some reflections. For Sierra Leoneans at home, remember that migration is not simply a ticket abroad. It often brings unresolved relational, emotional, and structural burdens with it. We must prepare our migrants for that reality, not only for remittances and success, but for emotional and relational health. For our diaspora communities, this is a moment for introspection. What mechanisms exist for peer support, for detecting relationship breakdowns before they become fatal, for offering safe alternatives when conflict escalates? For women, the tragic death of Isha Koroma is a stark reminder that even in societies with strong legal protections, women and men in diaspora settings remain vulnerable. We must elevate conversations around identity, consent, power, migration stress, and the need for safe relationship spaces. For families and remittance networks, if a migrant is under pressure, financially, emotionally, socially, it may not only affect their relationship, but trickle back home. Community education should include how families, extended networks, and sending home expectations can be managed proactively. For governments and diaspora agencies, we need frameworks that go beyond economic migration. Support services should include mental health, relationship counseling, legal literacy, and cultural adjustment. Governments both in host countries and home countries, including Sierra Leone, could partner to fund such initiatives. What to monitor going forward? The legal process. When is the extradition happening? What is the timeline for the trial? Will motive be made public? Community responses. Are Sierra Leonean diaspora associations issuing statements? Are there community dialogues, counseling initiatives, or policy proposals emerging in response to this incident? Media framing. Will this story be reported merely as a criminal act, or will it be framed as a symptom of deeper social challenges? Migration strain, diaspora relationships, domestic violence in African migrant communities? Academic NGO engagement? Will research organizations or NGOs step in to study this and similar cases, generate data, produce reports, push for intervention models? Policy change. Could this incident trigger new policy proposals for funding of diaspora support centers, for migrant family counseling, for violence prevention programming aimed at African communities abroad? As we continue to follow this story, I will bring you updates, analysis, and the voices that often go unheard: victims, diaspora community members, experts in migration and gender-based violence. Because this is not just about one man, one woman, and one crime. It is about our collective responsibility as Sierra Leoneans and as Africans abroad to create safer, more supportive communities wherever we are. I'm Isatu Kamara-Kargbo for the Bold African Voice. Stay with us because the next chapter is unfolding and we will keep watching, keep asking, keep demanding better. The deeper lessons for our African society. As the investigation unfolds and more facts come to light, we must not lose sight of the human dimension of this tragedy. Behind the headlines are families, a grieving mother in Sierra Leone who has lost her daughter thousands of miles away, and another family now carrying the shame and pain of a relative accused of taking a life. It's a story that pierces through borders and reminds us of our shared vulnerability as a people. This incident exposes a silent crisis that too often hides beneath the surface of success stories in the African diaspora: emotional instability, unaddressed trauma, and relationship breakdowns. Migration can be both an opportunity and a pressure cooker. Many Africans abroad juggle multiple jobs, send remittances home, face cultural alienation, and lack proper emotional or psychological support. Without healthy outlets or community frameworks, conflicts can spiral into irreversible tragedy. A broader reflection on violence and African masculinity. In many African societies, including Sierra Leone, cultural expectations often dictate that men must be strong, dominant, and unemotional, that expressing vulnerability is weakness. These ideas, when carried into diaspora environments that challenge traditional gender roles, can become sources of internal conflict and toxic reactions. Our societies have long glorified the stoic man who endures silently, even when emotionally broken. Yet silence, when paired with power and unprocessed anger, can be deadly. This is why it is imperative that African communities begin to redefine masculinity, not as dominance, but as emotional intelligence, communication, and respect. African leaders, too, must acknowledge that gender-based violence is not a private matter. It is a public health and national development issue. Domestic violence weakens communities, drains resources, and erodes trust in justice systems. The Global Mirror, learning from other African diaspora experiences. In countries like Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, and Ethiopia, diaspora communities have faced similar tragedies, intimate partner killings, domestic violence, and mental health crises. These incidents often reveal the same patterns: cultural silence, inadequate support, and a lack of proactive leadership from community organizations. For instance, Ghanaian and Nigerian diaspora groups in the UK and Canada have begun creating cultural mediation and mental health programs to de-escalate relationship conflicts before they explode. Sierra Leone and other West African communities could learn from these models by investing in community-based crisis response teams, counseling programs, and trusted helplines run by Africans for Africans. The role of media and faith leaders. Media houses like the Bold African Voice, BAV, and faith-based leaders carry a responsibility beyond informing. We must educate, humanize, and destigmatize conversations around violence, mental health, and relationships. When we sensationalize these stories, we fail the victims. But when we contextualize them, we awaken societies. Faith institutions, which hold moral authority in African communities, must shift their approach from judgment and silence to empathy and intervention. Sermons and community programs should integrate lessons about anger management, empathy, and peaceful coexistence. A call to African leaders. African leaders, both at home and abroad, must realize that governance is not limited to infrastructure and GDP growth. True leadership also means protecting the mental, emotional, and social well-being of citizens. Governments should strengthen diaspora engagement frameworks that go beyond remittance mobilization, focusing instead on welfare, legal aid, and crisis response. Fund national gender-based violence prevention programs and ensure embassies and consulates abroad have social officers trained to assist citizens in distress. Encourage bilateral collaboration between African ministries of social welfare and diaspora organizations in host countries to track and support at-risk citizens. Partner with civil society to build shelters, counseling centers, and community education platforms that make safety and mental health accessible for all. Advice to African citizens. To our brothers and sisters, whether at home or abroad, the lesson here is deeply personal. We must learn to talk before we act, to seek help before we explode, to choose life, not violence. If you are in a relationship that feels toxic or unsafe, walk away and reach out for help. There is no shame in leaving. There is no dignity in staying silent until tragedy strikes. If you are struggling mentally or emotionally, speak to someone, a friend, a counselor, a pastor, or a community leader. Silence kills, but sharing can heal. To the men, especially, strength is not found in control. It is found in compassion. Power is not proven in violence. It is proven in restraint. And to the women, you have the right to live without fear. Speak out, seek support, and know that your life matters, no matter where you are. Final reflections. The key messages. As we close tonight's segment, let us remember. The murder of Isha Koroma is not just a crime story. It's a mirror reflecting our collective social neglect. Musa Kargbo's case must be a turning point for community accountability, diaspora engagement, and renewed focus on the human condition of migrants. Violence is not born in a moment. It grows in silence, in stress, and in unhealed pain. Every African leader, from presidents to chiefs, and every citizen, from migrants to students, has a role in breaking this chain through education, empathy, and policy. The diaspora, often celebrated for remittances and success, must now also become a model for emotional wellness and humane coexistence. In summary, this tragedy should awaken us to a new consciousness, one where we, as Africans, value life above pride, love above anger, and dialogue above violence. Let this not be another story of sorrow, but the spark that compels us to build a more compassionate Africa, both at home and abroad. As we end tonight's discussion, remember, every statistic is a life, every tragedy a mirror. The story of Musa Kargbo and Isha Koroma is not just a headline, it's a wake-up call. To every African citizen, value dialogue over pride and compassion over control. To our leaders, protect your people not only with laws, but with love and support systems that prevent such pain from ever happening again. I'm Isatu Kamara-Kargbo, and this has been the Bold African Voice, BAV, giving voice to the voiceless and truth to power. Stay bold, stay humane, and never stop asking the hard questions. Subscribe, share, and join us as we expose the truths shaping Africa's destiny. Until next time, Africa, keep speaking.